Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm just going to make a quick guide on how to play Viktor and give you guys all the info you need to know. So things like identity, builds, and how to play lanes and stuff like that. I will keep it a bit shorter than normal because I didn't want to make a full in-depth guide with the next season right around the corner. But I will go a bit more in depth into his like runes and stuff later in the video. But I'll just give you guys the abridged version first because, Viktor is super OP and of course you guys want to abuse it while you still can. So for runes and items, the simplest thing to play and if you're not sure basically what to build is to go Blackfire, Liandry, Deathcap, and then you can just build like Void if you need it after, or other just situational mage items. This is just your stock standard. You don't have to think about it. You can take this almost every game. As for runes, this will be your standard page. You just go for Airy Primary with Manifold Transcendent Scorch, and then Precision Secondary with Legend Haste and Cutdown. There will be a timestamp in the description at the end of the video if you want to kind of know more about when to go different items and what the best runes are in different situations. But if you take this and build this, it'll be fine most of the time. So what is Viktor's identity? Well, I will preface this by saying that currently Viktor's identity is that he's really fucking OP, so you can just pick him basically whenever you want. Now, when Viktor gets toned down, what Viktor's identity will be is that he's really good against other mages. He's quite good in... Well, he's quite good against everything, actually, in terms of DPS or burst. He can do both. But I do think he is a pretty decent tank killer, which is quite nice because there's not that many viable tank killers mid at the moment. So in that sense, you'll probably be looking to fit him in your pool as your like anti-mage counter pick when the enemy team has, well, yeah, a mage matchup and a lot of tanks or a lot of bruisers or things that you need to DPS down. That's when he would be better than champs like Syndra. That being said, again, he's just very overtuned at the moment, so if you want to pick Viktor all the time, you can. You definitely can blind him at the moment. I will say Viktor's biggest weakness is probably gank setup. That's number one, so if you are playing Viktor into a comp that has a ton of threat onto you, it can be very difficult. A game like this could be an example, like if you're playing in a mobile mage against Aurora with gank setup, a ganking jungle like Belveth, Ashe ult, Maokai, this could be a pretty difficult game, so you do want to avoid those if possible. But again, like you can just blind pick it, and these games will probably come up sometimes, but not as often. I think next season he most likely will get nerfed, either directly or indirectly, and at that point you might need to start picking him a little more carefully. As for kind of how the games go, so Viktor is very, very strong in the 1v1, especially in the laning phase. He's not particularly good at any early skirmishes, so you can show up to fights and try to grab some KP if you want, but ultimately you probably will want to avoid, too many fights. You really just want to focus on like crushing that 1v1 as hard as possible. In the team fights, you pretty much just play as a front-to-back DPS mage, and then in side lane, Viktor's very good in side lane. You're actually very strong 1v1, and you can take jungle camps, and you hit turrets pretty quickly, so there's a lot of good stuff about Viktor. Mainly it's just knowing that your biggest weakness is, well, getting ganked and just like avoiding bad fights in the early game. If you can manage to navigate this, you're a very, very strong champion. So what I want to do is go through some laning examples. Let me just check my list. Okay, so the first one I want to show you guys is this one here. So I want to kind of show you, I guess, like how you want to play Viktor's lane in general. So biggest mistake that I see people that are new to Viktor doing is starting E. You pretty much never want to start E on Viktor. The reason is the cooldown is much longer than Q, and also Q is one of the best trading abilities in the game at level 1. So you really want to abuse your Q, basically. It's very, very difficult for people to trade back. You don't have to greed for the auto. If you can get the auto, it's good. I won't say if you can get the auto, it's going to be bad, but mainly you're just looking to proc Airy Scorch and get the Q1 damage. If you can get that auto off, especially with, with your shield up, it's obviously very good. Like, they won't generally be able to beat you. Also, one thing that you can consider is that a lot of the time you can trade evenly with your opponent, and that can actually be good for you. What I mean by that is, like, if Jace and I traded evenly right now, let's say we did 50 damage to each other, Jace will never kill me in this lane, but there is a good chance that I kill Jace, and you'll see that his health gets a lot lower around levels 2 and 3. So you can take some trades that look a little bit suspicious at level 1, knowing that when you spike really hard at 2 and 3, then it'll end up being really strong. So yeah, these trades early are generally quite good. That's kind of what I mean about like an even trade being good. So like that trade would be good for an assassin or someone that's like has a lot of kill threat onto you early. But you can see that I'm just like trying to play very aggressively on the creeps, making my opponent CS with abilities, just trying to Q basically whenever I can. And yeah, this is one of the main goals, I guess. Once you get level 2, there's kind of another thing. So Viktor E is very, very hard to miss. But it's really important you don't miss them because like every E matters a lot. So if you need to like time it with CS, that's fine. Just make sure you hit these because the cooldown is very long. Be a little careful how many E's you use at level 2. The main reason for that is because it is kind of costly. So if you use too many E's at level 2, you won't have enough mana to actually push them out of lane at level 3. So generally what I say is like use either like 1 or 2 E's at level 2, or like another rule you could use is maybe don't go below half mana. It's kind of like playing Ori when you put points in W. Just, yeah, basically don't use too much mana on E level 2. A couple is fine, but you want to save the majority of your mana for when you have 2 points in E, because that's when it really starts to hit hard. So at level 3, you want to just start like Eing your opponent on cooldown, basically, as long as you don't think it's going to miss. And this is a very critical time in the game. Like, a lot of lanes, if you're against something that doesn't have sustain, you'll just be able to push out here. So you can kind of see that, like, well, basically this guy is getting completely destroyed. This VOD was on my stream, by the way, so if you do want to go back and watch it, you can. But the TLDR is, like, this is kind of, like, what you're looking for early game as Viktor. Obviously in good matchups. Viktor, despite being like weak in the skirmishes and stuff, is strong enough to prevent the enemy mid from ever really being there, right? Like that's what you're looking to go for. It's very important that you kind of see this as like active scaling. Like, yes, you do want to scale, but it's really important that you bully the fuck out of your opponent on the way there, because if you don't, it's like you have like these big early game weaknesses of like, you know, bad skirmishes and getting ganked and whatever. But if you can build a big enough 1v1 lead, you can, you know, stop the enemy mid from getting in river, and also it makes it very hard for the enemy jungler to gank if the enemy mid is just like too low to actually set up. So from this point, what you would do is like you have like your huge item lead, and you can just force trades over and over, knowing basically that there is no way they can trade back against you. I won't end up going through the whole thing, but I'll just show you a bit later that I end up at some like ridiculous number, like what am I here? It's like my 60 versus 30. Yeah, I think I end up at like 70 versus 35. Actually, I'm just going to go because I want to say, yeah, 70 versus 33. So again, you can go back and watch this VOD if you want to see the whole thing, but the TLDR is just really abusing the fact that they're against a champ without sustain and that doesn't have a way of trading on you. You can pretty much just poke them out constantly with E and Q. So next matchup on my list was versus Hui. Let's see if I can find it. It's a game where I went 11-4. Where is it? This one here. So if you're in a mage matchup where the mage is a bit stronger, it might be a bit more contested. You know, Jace is not particularly strong in lane against other mages. A champ like Hui is still countered by Viktor, I would say. The only mages that are really good against Viktor 1v1 is stuff like Ori and Syndra. Syndra's quite good against Viktor because of the gank setup. Ori, I think, is just one of the stronger laners, but it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, you really want to leverage your Q shield, right? You can see here that I'm willing to just tank the damage, essentially, knowing that, again, similar to the Jace VOD, I will poke him out. And I'm not too worried about taking damage in return because he just does not have that same damage onto me. Abusing your level 1 spike is super critical because a lot of mid laners will struggle to harass past the wave, whereas Viktor has no issues with this at all. So like if you can get pushed, you know, these certain champs won't be able to trade back and you can just force trade with them over and over. Here you can see that I really hard abused my level 2 spike, and to be honest, at this point the lane is like pretty much over already. Yeah, I just have like too much of a lead. You can just poke over and over. One thing to be careful of is, you know, try and place this ward before 2 minutes 30, or yeah, I guess 2 minutes 30. Just basically place this ward before it crashes, just because you don't want to be placing this ward instead of harassing on a turret. You know, like you really want to use this opportunity of the wave going under to get a lot of free harass or like deny them creeps or whatever, as opposed to, you know, if I spend this time going to get the CS, I'll miss out on this opportunity to ace. So that's kind of like a mid lane fundamental thing. That's not like directly related to Viktor, but it is something that if you mess up, you'll probably die. But yeah, not really much to look at here, just the same thing. Looking to poke them out. One thing I'll quickly say while I remember, I'm not actually sure if I do it in this VOD, but another mistake I see a lot of Viktor mains make is misusing their W. So a lot of the time, okay, this is a gank, so it's not a good example, but you almost always want a W before ulting because, you know, one, the slow will help the ult get ticks, but also like if you W and then ult, even if it's just a 1v1, they kind of have to choose, like, are they going to trade back this damage or do they run out of the W to not get stunned? And like, if they run out of the W, they take a bunch of damage for free, right? Like you can just use all your spells and run away. You don't even have to kill them. If they decide to tank the W and get stunned, most likely your R will just end up killing them. So yeah, again, this is a gank, so not a good example, but just something I remembered off the top of my head. Always be using your W before your R, pretty much. So another VOD I wanted to look at was, I have one versus Aurelia. Let's see, where is it? Game where I went 10-5. Okay, must be this one. Okay, so when you're playing against melees, like melees with sustain or gank setup can definitely be harder. Depending on how strong the melee is early, you might need to let the wave come to you. So really strong melees like Aurelia and Yone. Actually, no, Yone's okay. Aurelia and Yasuo specifically, you kind of need to just like let them push the wave from level 1. Most like assassin melees, you can bully levels like 1, 2, and sometimes 3. At that point, you really need the wave to be coming back to you. Like, ideally, you want the wave just on your side so they can't run you down and they can't set up ganks on you. I will talk about this more in depth later on, but shield bash and bone plating is very, very useful against melees just because of the way they trade. So when you're playing against one of these champs, if you want a really hard pressure lane, you can go for this. You can also play like phase rush just for scaling if you don't think you'll ever actually beat them. This was a weird game because I actually solo killed this Aurelia at level 1, so it's maybe, again, not the best example, but you'll kind of see what I mean with the wave. Like I want the wave always in this position where she can't actually run me down, right? Like, so she doesn't have the space to run me down, and I can set up ganks onto her. I'm safe from any of her ganks, and I can just kind of like poke her down for free. So if you can keep the wave there, the longer you can, the better. When the wave is pushing away from you, definitely be a little safer. Like, I kind of remember there's like 1 point... Yeah, so like right here, even though she's 0-3 and I'm 2-0, this is a very scary window where she has all this space. So in this spot, because you know the wave is coming to you, just be willing to give up like 1 or 2 CS and just, yeah, let the wave come to you. Another trick for these melee matchups is just to remember to place your W on yourself and then stand in it. You know, like it can be difficult to hit the melees when they have so much mobility. But again, if you W yourself and stand in it, they either have to get stunned or they lose a lot of time autoing you. So yeah, you can kind of see here, we can just use that in order to actually deal some relevant damage back. So yeah, that's basically the trick to playing against melees. Now I have one more matchup here, which is Viktor versus Garen, where I went 11... It's a shame you can't filter this by champ, by the way. It wouldn't let me. I had a look. So if you're against a champ that has just too much sustain that you can't actually do anything against, so dshield second wind users like Akali, or, you know, something like Garen, you have a couple options. You can play... I would recommend you play this, which is like phase rush full scaling. I think that's like overall the best. It means you'll scale really hard and you'll be super strong in side lane and stuff. In these lanes, it's mainly about mana management. Like, you can poke with Q because it's cheap, but don't use too many E's because most likely you'll just end up running yourself and I think you actually see that here. Like, once I was on half mana, I was like, okay, like maybe I should probably stop using my E because I'm just never killing this guy. So yeah, it's just really critical against these champs that you don't run You can just play to scale, like there's nothing wrong with that. You will still like outscale almost all of these champs. And then, you know, when you get into the mid game and stuff, you'll be really strong. So I'll quickly just show you guys some team fights, but that's like basically how it goes for the laning phase. Where's the game? You can watch maybe like this one or something. So in team fights, I mean, it's kind of like you just play like a regular mage. Like you will just be trying to DPS from behind your tanks. Let's see if we can go look at one later in the game. Yeah, maybe look at some of these fights. Well, okay, this is 30 minutes, but typically, what you'll be doing is, you know, start the team fight like behind your tanks, right? So you see I've got my Rammus in front. If you can kill people with your ult, it's kind of good. I definitely messed up this fight, but if you can kill people with your ult so that you get the increased size, it's great. But it's really, really, probably the most important thing is really just making sure that you're like, you have people with you. Because like Viktor does a shit ton of damage, but he is like very vulnerable, right? And I think here, like if I had been caught by this Gnar off on my own, it would have been pretty bad. This fight is actually a good example of bad ulti usage. Like I said, I didn't end up getting the reset with it. Be very, very careful wasting your ult like this, because your ult is a ton of damage, and if you're not sure you can guarantee get a reset or, you know, at least like trap someone in your W with it, it's probably just better off not using it. And just like holding it for threat. There's nothing really wrong with that. This doesn't seem like the best VOD, to be honest, because it looks like we were just insanely fed. We could have a look at one of these ones. You know, this game we ended up losing, so we'll have to see one of these team fights. Yeah, there really isn't too much to it. I mean, you are just basic mage team fighting. Although, one thing to consider, I guess, is that you have a lot of movement speed, and if you are running the Lich Bane build, like, that is very important that you use that move speed in order to chase people down, like, get the autos off and stuff. The move speed build is really nice. You can see, like, there is a good example of it, being able to, like, kite out the melees and stuff. Other, like, big team fights that I can think of, I don't know, I've played so many games lately. What does one of these ones look like? Actually, yeah, this looks like a kind of good example of a team fight. So, show up mid, have all my cooldowns, playing the burn build so we can play it nice and slow. My team engages, which is completely fine. We get our ult down and get an instant reset. This is basically perfect, like W into ult, get the instant reset, which is super, super nice. At this point, I guess like the thing to be careful of is CCs. So this was definitely a misplay by me. Like I didn't notice the Hui EW on the floor. That's something worth thinking about just as a mage in general, is like what specific cooldowns do the enemy team have that you need to avoid. So for example, Hui E, you know, Nami Q. I don't know if that's a Maokai, I can't tell, but there's a Skarner ult. So, oh, that's not a Maokai, it's a Warwick. But yeah, specific abilities. If you can be aware of those, like that'll save you a lot of deaths. Like there, I kind of die for free, but that's kind of like how you want to approach the fight. You know, front to back team fight, looking to DPS. Definitely don't int for damage. You know, like you, especially if you're playing the burn build, the longer the fight, the better. And you have pretty low CDs as well, so long fights will be good for you. So yeah, I think that's basically it for everything you need to know to play Viktor. So now I'm just gonna kind of over-explain the runes and items a little bit. So we'll start with runes. Aerial Comet. If you're not sure, just go Airy, but I think it can be worth running Comet into longer range mages, so for example, like Vel'Koz or Hui or something. But yeah, if you're not sure, run Airy, and then you can run Phase Rush into, again, like there's melees that have too much sustain. If you are into a melee with too much sustain, you might as well swap Scorched Gathering Storm as well, just because, you know, you're not going to kill them anyway. I don't think it's ever really worth running First Strike. I think the rune is kind of just too weak, so I wouldn't really worry about it. As for your secondary runes, most of the time it will be this, you know, Legend, Haste, and Cut Down. Again, if you're against one of those super sustainers, you could swap Cut Down to POM. I don't actually think you need it, but you could. That is an option. Alternatively, though, like you will just be running this or this like most games. Another good secondary is the Resolve Tree. So this is very, very good against shorter range champs or against assassins. Shield Bash is very, very good on Viktor, ends up dealing a lot of damage. Bone Plating also extremely good against assassins, especially ones that can't proc it from range. So running this into some sort of melee assassin is really, really good. You can even run something like this against a more contested mage matchup. Like if you're playing against something like Orianna, I think this can be good. Like this is the most early game power you can possibly get. I kind of like this though because it's like almost as good early game, but you get like a lot of haste out of it. So I kind of prefer this, but if you want to like really be as strong as you possibly can, that's the way to do it. Finally, I'll just go to some items. Where did I put this? I think I made it Viktor Guide. Let me just search this. Yeah, there it is. Okay, Viktor Guide. So, okay, so for your first item, you've got three options, which are Blackfire, Seraphs, and Ludens. Ludens, I think, is just kind of trash at the moment, so to be honest, I'd pretty much never build Ludens. If you were going to build it, it would be like versus all squishy range, but I really think Ludens kind of sucks in general, so default to Blackfire. The time to go Seraphs is if you just think you'll need it to win the side lane. Like, running something like Seraphs plus Lichbane, or even Seraphs plus Banshee, like, if that is the difference between beating a Fizz on the side lane or not, it's worth building. But, like, you should realize that it's always lower damage, so you're kind of just saying that, like, the increased gold you're going to get from winning side lane and pushing out the prior and, you know, getting jungle camps, hitting turrets and stuff, that gold is going to make up for the damage you're losing and potentially like any gold that you would have given over by dying. So I don't go Seraphs that often. I do it occasionally, but yeah, most of the time it's just I'm going for Blackfire. Second item, again, I think if you're not sure, just go Liandry. It's good against basically everything, and extra health is nice. I do go Lichbane a lot, though, so Lichbane is really, really good for side lane. It's really, really good when the movement speed is valuable. And yeah, I'd say I actually like default to Lichbane more than Liandry. But the reason I say to default to Liandry is because, like, you can have bad Lichbane games, but you could, like, literally never have bad Liandry games. And it's a bit easier to play as well, because you have a bit more health. But Lichbane's really good, and I find myself going Lichbane a lot. One little thing about Lichbane is that it has a terrible, terrible build path. So, like, if you end up going home and buying, like, Sheen and Aetherwiz, just leave the game. It'd be much better. Like, if you can buy a rod, go for it. If you can't, like, you might want to go for something else, like, build one of these. Because, yeah, the Lichbane build path is terrible, unless you can buy a rod. Flatpin items. Flatpin items are good. If you're solo AP, you can definitely play for one of them. I probably wouldn't do it if you have multiple APs on your team. Also, I know some people go the Storm Surge and Shadow Flame build. Again, you could do this if you're solo AP. Personally, I'm not a fan because of how hard it falls off. But yeah, if you're the only AP on your team, you can consider these. I think they're both pretty good. Storm Surge for movement speed obviously is great. Shadow Flame is more damage, has a worse build path, but when you complete it, it's probably better. So yeah, you can consider those, but mostly go for these. And then after that, it's pretty much always Death Cap and Void, depending on if you need them. You know, like, if they don't have MR, you just go for Death Cap. If they do, you buy Void. After that, you can buy situational items, basically whatever, Banshee, Zonya. You can buy those second item as well, but most of the time you won't need it on Viktor because you have your Q shield, plus, like, you can get health from, like, these slots as well. So you won't often need a defensive. I'm not even sure if I've built a defensive at all. I don't think I have. I think I've just been relying on my health from other areas, which I think is the better thing to do, because the defensive items are only really worth buying because they reduce the enemy's damage so much. Like, they're not even that good. It's like, by making the enemy build Void, you're, like, hurting their damage more than you're hurting your own. That's like, a good way to think about it. So yeah, hopefully that kind of clears that up. If you guys have any more questions about how to play the Reworked Viktor, just put them in the comment section below or come check out my stream. Again, you can go back to my stream VODs. If you go to YouTube and you go to live, you can look at the stream VODs there, or you can come over on Twitch and have a look as well. And you should be able to find some of the Viktor games. But yeah, I hope that was it. Let me know what you guys think of the format. I just wanted to keep it kind of short and a bit more casual, I guess, because I didn't want to make a super, high production guide with only, I don't know how many days, like how many days left in the season? Not many, 22. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next one.